And we did actually go into Rocky Mountain a third time, just a little bit, because we were looking for moose.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to one of the wildlife areas, and we did not see a moose yet.
No. So sad. I was going to ask. It's like, everyone wants to know about the moose. Moose watch.
I know. We're on moose patrol, and we have not seen one yet. Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Here we are again. TypeScript FM live from Airbnb in quiet mode as our kids are all asleep, and my microphone setup is again not ideal. But Eric's microphone setup is ideal, and he sounds great. Did you listen to the last week's episode? It sounded great.
Crisp. Very crisp.
Yep. Very
Although
crisp.
This time I'm not going to whisper as much because that didn't work out so well.
It was fine. I mean, I listened to the whole thing and it was good.
It required more editing on my part.
Yeah, the volume normalization I noticed with the Riverside editing, which is what we've been using, is just, it's not ideal. Like, I had been using Descript before and I felt like it did a much better job at the normalization, whereas Riverside requires a lot more tweaking. So, but I mean, the past few episodes I think have been much better than, other ones. What's new with you? Obviously, I'm still on vacation, but what have you been up to?
Yeah, well, I have inflicted injury on myself.
Oh no.
I have a stress injury in my left shin from running
no.
too much and too hard. And my doctor's like, you need to stop running for a little while until we can get it under control. But they're right. I mean, I just don't want to hear that because I like running long distances for fun.
Yeah.
Because I'm nuts.
Did they suggest like something you could do instead?
Yeah, low impact stuff like elliptical cycling or walking, as long as it's not hurting. They basically said if it starts to hurt, stop that activity. So that's the issue. So I have an MRI on Friday to figure out more about what's going on in the shin, but we're pretty sure it's a stress injury in my shin, which sucks. Yeah. I'm also incredibly tired, but it's all my fault this time. I can't blame it on anyone. I've been doing the revenge bedtime procrastination, which is when you are upset that you don't have as much free time as you want, so you decide to stay up late to do what you want, and then it bites you in the butt later. So I did that. I did that last week, and I am having some fatigue in my soul after that.
That's my everyday though,
Yeah.
With the three kids, it's like I need that time. I'm not going to go to bed. It's funny because we were just talking before the show that I will lay down with my youngest daughter to try to get her to sleep. And it is proof to me that I could go to sleep at like 9 p.m. if I actually laid down myself, because I'll find myself drifting off a little bit. I'm like, no, I must stay awake because I want to do stuff.
So true.
Yep. But, hopefully over time it'll, be a little bit easier. And then when they're older, they're a bit more fun to like be up with late. Like we can play video games and other stuff that I want to do anyway, I could do with them. So.
Yeah. And then I enjoyed playing with Maeve's Magnetiles so much that I bought a 100-piece set that'll be delivered tomorrow.
Kids love the Magnetiles. They're really good.
They're great. I was having a lot of fun playing with Maeve, and I was like, oh, these Magnetiles they're really awesome. So
yeah, the Airbnb that we stayed at last, they had Magnetiles, and the kids set up like a large war zone type of deal. Like they set up a big fortress with the Magnetiles, and then I played war with them where I had to attack them, try to take down the walls of the fortress and stuff, which were conveniently impenetrable and could not be knocked down. That was not allowed. So I failed. I did not get to defeat them. But anyway,
classic. Yeah, that's how it goes. So, how are things going on vacation? You got week number two.
They're so good. It's so great. This vacation is awesome. So, last time we left off in Rocky Mountain National Park, we were there one day, but then the day that the podcast came out, we had done our second day already. And that was when we did a hike, and we did it was not like a hard hike, but it's a long one. So you go into what's an area called Bear Lake. And so you can walk around the lake, and that's really easy. There's not like much of an elevation gain or anything. It takes like 30 minutes. But then you can hike another trail that brings you to three different lakes, and each one is like 200 feet gain in altitude. So
Whoa.
it's a bit moderate, and it's about a 3 mile round trip. And so we did that with the kids, and they did awesome. We saw three different lakes: Nymph Lake, Dream Lake, and Emerald Lake, which is the last one that you see, and it was absolutely beautiful. Like I don't think I've ever seen anything as beautiful as that ever.
Mhm.
And we've been to Glacier, and we've been to other national parks, and that was way up there, like tippy top. That was super good. And then on the drive to the next Airbnb, we actually crossed Colorado going southwest. And so we drove straight through the mountains, and that was probably one of the greatest drives I've ever been on. It was just like almost every second of it was just like awe-inspiring, like the huge canyons and going down the mountains and stuff. It was beautiful. And then yesterday we spent most of the day in Mesa Verde National Park, so very close to the border of New Mexico. Mesa Verde was really neat. It's known for those cliff dwellings from the ancestral Pueblo people. I got to see the Cliff Palace dwelling up close, and that was super fun. So anyway, that is the journal of our entire trip so far. If you want to live vicariously through me, you can check out my Instagram, because that's where I'm posting photos and updates and stuff throughout the trip. So if you want to see what I've been seeing, you can go check that out if you want.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Let's get to some of the news, though. There's some big news this week.
Yep. It's the week of July 2nd, 2025. And the big thing, the big headliner, if you weren't aware, the TypeScript 5.9 beta just dropped with the usual blog post. And some of the biggest things, well deserved, well needed, a refresh to the tsc init and default ts config options. So this goes through, it removes a ton of the commented out stuff that you might have seen, like that big boilerplate. When you do it, you just get every option that is possible commented out with a little bit of prose explaining what it is. And it's quite a bit, and most of the time people just delete it all. But now the new updated tsc init will output a config that has module node next, which is targets the latest module format, ES module format. It'll target ES next for JavaScript compilation, so that's the latest ECMAScript standard target that they support. Source maps are true, declarations are true, declaration maps are true. Declaration maps, if you're not familiar, is a way to map declaration files to the original TypeScript. So it's like, a JavaScript source map, but for TypeScript declarations back to TypeScript. If you're not familiar. And then there's two options that are now set to true that weren't set to true before in TypeScript script. In the strict true is no unchecked index access is true, and exact optional property types is true. So these are two huge ones. These are ones that we recommend that you always have on, and now it'll be on by default.
So we've talked about no unchecked index access before. I don't know if we've talked about exact optional property types, but do you have like a quick, in case a listener hasn't heard of those exactly before, like what exactly each of those does?
Yeah, I do know off the top of my dome, no unchecked index access. That is if you are like indexing into an object or you're indexing into an array, you need to check if that index exists in that thing. You can't just get at it right away. That is usually an error. And in fact, if you do not have this set, those accesses are not safe. Okay, so exact optional property types allows you to make like a type or an interface, like exactly a value, this or this, or undefined, and it doesn't let you like set an undefined. So the idea is that this is an optional property, like you're doing like an option bag type thing. So it'll truly enforce the definition provided as an optional property. So So for example, if you had a property on a thing, you know, some prop question mark colon, you know, light or dark, and then you decided later to be like, okay, I'm going to make an object that is this type, and I decided, okay, my prop, I'm going to set undefined to it. It won't let you do it. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to set it to dark or light or not set it at all. So it's kind of like this option bag type
Yes.
modifier.
Okay, so that makes sense to me. I am going to nerd snipe you though, because is there a difference between not setting a property versus setting a property to undefined?
There is very technically.
Yeah, I think there is, right? That's
Yes.
why you're supposed to use the in check, right? To check if a property actually exists. Because I've seen some people say like, why doesn't like saying if, my object dot property is truthy because that property exists. But that's not technically true because a property could be set to undefined, but that property does exist on the object. So it's not the
That's right.
same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you sometimes TypeScript is a little bit literal and wants you to make sure that the property does exist, and so you have to use the in check, which is sometimes why you'll get a compiler error if you don't do that.
Yep. Yep. So
So
there is a subtle difference, but yeah, it
yeah.
does.
So in this case, with this flag enabled, that is going to be true, where you will not be allowed to like set an optional property to undefined explicitly. You have to just like not set it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, that's nice.
Yeah. So it's mostly anti-foot gun behavior. Another big thing in the TypeScript 5.9 beta is support for import defer. The idea behind the ES import defer syntax is that it will only execute the import and the code when you access it. So if you never access it, you never pay the cost of doing the import, you never pay the cost of running the code. But as soon
Well,
as you access it,
you do. So one thing it does mention is that import defer will still download and load the module. It just won't execute anything until you've actually used an import from it.
I got that wrong.
No, that's okay, because it is a little bit confusing because listeners might be wondering what's the difference between import defer versus a dynamic import, which you await, right? So a dynamic import is a promise that will, when executed, go load the module and then, execute whatever's in it. So if it has initialization code or something, it'll evaluate it. Whereas import defer will just load the module, but will not execute anything in it until you actually call something from it. So the blog post says that it's really good for situations where you have platform specific initialization or you have very heavy initialization that's very expensive and you want to defer that expense to be incurred, whenever you want it to be incurred. So an example might be for Excalibur, we do browser detection for features. And so sometimes those can be expensive and you don't want those to always be evaluated as soon as you import the module. And so you might use import defer to be like, I only want to do this feature detection if I'm actually on the platform. Otherwise, I don't want to incur that cost.
That's right. Cool. And fun note, on Blue Sky, Rob Palmer noted that this is his favorite feature of this release.
Mm-hmm. It is pretty cool. And also note that it's not down leveled or transformed, but if you do use it with a bundler or runtime that supports it, then it'll work.
Moving on, we have support for module Node 20, which is the stable target of the latest Node module syntax, which allows you to load common from ESM.
Well, one thing I know about the Node 20 module is that it sets the target to ES 2023.
Yes. Yeah, it's mostly a crystallization of the current semantics of Node into a stable target, is what I'm reading.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
the node next is always a floating behavior with the latest version of Node that they support. Next up, we have summary descriptions in DOM APIs. Previously, TypeScript only linked to MDM documentation for an API. It's awesome, but it would be more awesome if you just had a quick description of the API when you looked at the little like type hint. If you're in, for example, if you're in NeoVim or you're in VS Code and you're like hovering over a thing, you just want to know what it does. Well, now, thanks to Adam Nagy, TypeScript now includes a summary description for many of the DOM APIs. So that's pretty slick.
Yeah, saves you a click. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, saves me a click. Anytime you can keep you in the flow and you don't have to leave your editor, it's a win. Next up, we have expandable hovers in preview. This is kind of called quick info or editor tooltips, but this is super useful when you want to peek at variables to see their types and see what they actually refer to. So a lot of times you're like, oh, yeah, I got to follow the thread, follow the caret to see what a thing is. Well, oftentimes you just want to see the value when you hover over, and now you can see that. So instead of like just having to be like, oh, what is this? Okay, I get this type, but what is that actually? Now you get this auto expand that you can like see this type has width and height and background color and all this kind of cool stuff. So again, saves you a click and it keeps your context fresh.
Yeah, this is like a huge quality of life improvement because you'll hover over a function that takes a parameter and the parameter has a type, like either an interface or a type alias or whatever. And you're like, well, okay, but what is the interface? Like what's on it? What are the properties on it? And so you have to hit F12 or go to definition and then follow that rabbit hole, like Eric was saying. But with this, it gives you like little expando collapse buttons inside the tooltip. So this is like an editor feature. It's not like, part of using it from the command line or whatever. It's part of your editor. But then you can go and expand the little tooltips inside of it so that you don't have to go to definition. And I think is just a nice quality of life improvement.
Next up in the quality of life improvements is the TypeScript 5.9 language server will now support a configurable hover length for tooltips. So before you might, for example, I put like big examples in like my TS doc, my JS doc comments. Like I put like code samples in there. And if it's too long, TypeScript will cut it off. It'll get truncated. So now you can tweak this and have longer, like maximum hover length. So that's pretty nice for those of us that put a lot of stuff in our JS doc. All right. And then there's a few other notable optimizations. First one is the cache instantiations on mappers. So this is an optimization kind of like brought about by, complex libraries like Zod and TRPC, where TypeScript winds up replacing type parameters with specific type arguments, instantiating many of the same intermediate types over and over again. So now there's a cache on this. So this allows greater performance and errors and excessive type instantiation at depth, which is great for these libraries. And this change was brought by a community member. I believe the name is pronounced Mateus. I'm going to go with that. I apologize. But yeah, this is pretty slick. And then the other optimization we got is avoiding closure creation in file or directory exists using source. And I'm going to have to reread this because I do not understand this one.
I was saying that in some of the tests it was like speeding up performance by like 11%. So something pretty substantial. But I think it depends on large projects. So it must be something related to like how TypeScript crawls the file structure to figure out what to type check. And so if you have a large project, that obviously is going to take longer. But with this performance enhancement, it now should be like, up to 11% faster for a really large project. So whatever magic is going on there to avoid closure creation, which I do not know, we have a contributor to thank for that.
Yeah, I'm going to take a look at the PR. Oh, this is awesome. So, this is a two-liner, but effectively they removed an arrow function that was just a pass-through. It was an arrow function that called the underlying function with another file type. So my guess is what's happening is because this is happening, arrow functions capture the current closure, and that's just more memory. So
yeah, that is a JavaScript high performance tip for you.
Yeah, that's super.
You got to include that in your next edition of your talk.
Yeah, actually, I didn't talk about closures causing memory thrashing, so that's pretty cool. I might have to write that one down.
Yeah, that's super cool. We haven't talked about TS Go for a little while because there hasn't been many user-facing PRs, but you found something this week from Jake Bailey that is pretty cool.
That's right. This is tsgolint, which
Ooh,
is an experimental proof of concept TypeScript Go power JS Linter written in Go. Super cool.
man, we've got quite a bit of like linting news going on lately. I feel like this past month, there's been the Biome V2, and then Josh Goldberg's Flint project, and now this tsgolint.
That's right. And in fact, Jake Bailey and Josh Goldberg have worked on this,
Ooh,
and it's looking pretty neat. Some of the stats up here are pretty impressive. I
yeah.
think that Jake Bailey posted a Redonkulous speed up on huge repositories like VS Code, a 38x speed up for a total of like 4.5 seconds to lint the whole code base. Microsoft TypeScript, a 2x increase for a final time of 2 seconds from 47. So these are big numbers. TypeORM went down to less than a second, which was a 35x speed up. And Vue Core is also less than a second, which is wild. That's wild speed ups.
That is wild. I wonder, see, this is what we're talking about when we said last time, I wonder if TypeScript native will allow TypeScript-eslint to do type-aware linting with the native TypeScript Go, and that'll just like be sped up. So I would be curious to know if these benchmarks are with type-aware linting or if it's just, vanilla linting without type-aware rules.
Yeah. Let me look at the README here real quick. So I think they've
I
implemented
know.
like a subset of the rules as far as I can tell.
Okay.
And what hasn't been prototyped is non-type aware rules. So I'm assuming that they're playing around with type awareness here.
Okay. That's cool. Well, Josh, I know you're listening, so that would be cool to know.
Awesome. This is so cool. I'm going to play with this.
Well, we've got a PSA just to close out the news. So when this episode releases and you're listening to it, dear listener, you should make sure that you go and update your Node.js because there are some high severity security patches that were released, and they haven't talked about what they are, but they affect all the release lines from 24 to 22 and 20. So all the LTS release lines, you're going to want to make sure that you update for some high severity security patch.
Yeah. We have no prior knowledge. We just know that they're big. So make sure you take a look when this episode drops.
And we've linked to the blog post. So hopefully Node.js will just update the blog post or publish a new blog post that details what the patches actually are. But just a PSA for you. Cool.
We can move on to the community highlights.
Yeah.
And speaking of type-aware linting, we have a new library called TSL from Blue Sky user Arnaud Barr. It's an extension of TSC. So this is used inside as like a TypeScript plugin. And this is written all in TypeScript and JavaScript. So this is just built in. It's using a similar model to TypeScript-eslint for their rules. And it's just cooked into the TypeScript compiler plugins. And the advantage here, as far as I can tell, and then someone can correct me if I'm wrong, the advantage here is that this allows you to reuse the TypeScript AST that is used by the TypeScript compiler to also perform your linting. So that you don't have to do, okay, we're going to compile, throw that AST away, and then run our linter, and then regenerate an AST, and then use that to do linting. So the idea here is that we're reusing the AST to avoid regenerating it.
Yeah. I think the Buit in the thread says it's only a 15% extra check time, so it doesn't have to do a full build. I think a way to think about this is if you think of you have your TSLint, your TypeScript ESLint process, and it shells out to TSC to do a build and then uses that to do type-aware linting. Well, what if you could just run that same linting logic as TypeScript builds, right? And so TypeScript plugins, TSC plugins, have that context where they can use the TypeScript AST at that time. So that's why it's only the extra execution time to do the lint part of it. Doesn't have to do a full build.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting way of like trying to avoid redoing work and getting gains that way. So I think this is a really interesting like project to like maybe nudge some of the like future developments here is like, oh, maybe we need to be thinking about how to hook in linting into the compiler process itself.
Yeah,
Very neat.
that's super neat.
Next up, friend of the show, Josh Goldberg, authored a tweet about overhauling the TypeScript ESLint homepage. So there's a preview because there's a whole bunch of stuff that they're doing. So definitely check out that preview. It looks really nice. I was scrolling around and I like it. I think it's a lot cleaner. I think it really gets to the meat really quickly, and the examples are really compelling so far. So I'm liking it.
It's
Continue
a
the good
it's
work.
a it's a nice like marketing case study, open source marketing case study, because a lot of people don't think that you need to really do quote unquote marketing for open source projects, but you do. And so, like we want to redo our homepage for Excalibur, and seeing what Josh is doing as a redo for the TypeScript ESLint homepage is really cool to sort of see like how does the messaging change, how does the like explanations of what the benefits are and what the features are and what TypeScript ESLint does for you and some of the other stuff that they're doing is pretty cool.
Yep, really cool.
Next up, we've got a blog post from Naman on a proposed new enum syntax for TypeScript. And both of us read through this, and I really like it because the proposal is basically like, think of you can say like const my object as const or like as some type. Well, he's proposing that you just do like as enum, and then it makes it an enum. And so it's a fully type only thing. There's no like runtime macros, no down leveling, no transformation needed. It just is a type only expression. But then TypeScript can like make sure that it enforces the same primitive type for each of the enum values. You can use it just like you do with a regular enum. And then they also added on to the proposal, what if we could use multiple values for enums? And in C#, we call those flags. And in his blog post, he calls them option sets, but they're basically the same thing, being able to do like a bitwise operation or a bitmask to have multiple enum values for, property value. So I really like this idea. So maybe someone will see this and we'll do something with TypeScript. But how does this compare to like the proposal enum that's in TC39 right now?
First off, this is a kind of like an orthogonal concern, perhaps related to the same, we want enums, but in the TypeScript, proposal by Naman, this is a way to make enums just better while just knowing that these are just JavaScript objects versus like the kind of the goofiness that exists in TypeScript today, where it's enums are this runtime emit feature that have some odd properties to them and don't really behave maybe in a way that you might expect, especially for a lot of the use cases that he mentioned. Like now there is, in fact, a TC enum proposal that advanced to stage 1, if I'm not mistaken, recently. And this is to add enums directly to JavaScript. So this is like, we want our cake and to eat it too. So it would be awesome, I'd say, if we had this in JavaScript, and it looks great. It looks a lot like the TypeScript syntax. So I imagine that this will change, but the initial proposal here aligns with the current semantics of the current TypeScript enum syntax.
Yeah, so it seems like we would sort of get one or the other, sort of like if the native JavaScript enum proposal, doesn't make it past stage 2 or stage 3, then maybe TypeScript team could consider like an as enum expression. So we sort of have a little bit of that type syntax, but we don't need to have full native enum support, even though that would be nice.
Yeah.
But like if the native enum support does get to stage 3, that would mean that it would eventually get implemented back into TypeScript. So then we would not need like a different type of enum expression.
Yeah. And I do hope that we get a little bit of difference in the ECMAScript proposal, because the existing TypeScript enums I've always found to be very goofy. So I think this would be cool. And there's a lot of good information here on the proposal about what's different from the TypeScript enum because they already have some differences that they called out
Hmm.
explicitly. And then, what the entrance criteria are for the different stages in this situation. Next up, there was a great video by Chris Baptiste, but you might know him better as Trash Dev. It's called WTF TypeScript. It's where he, the Primogen, TJ DeVries, and Casey Mortori listen and critique live his presentation that he gave recently about kind of the goofy things that TypeScript lets you do. So it's kind of like, if I will, I think it might be an homage to the WAT talk in JavaScript by, now I'm forgetting her
Gary
name,
Bernhardt.
Gary Bernhardt, by Gary
Yep.
Bernhardt. But kind of in the same, like, these are some quirky things that TypeScript lets you do that, you could maybe argue are less good or less bad, neutral, but kind of goofy.
Yep.
But
I mean, it's funny because I think this is great. I mean, you would think that as like the TypeScript.fm podcast, we'd be like, oh, TypeScript is perfect. It's the perfect language. Everyone should use it. But that's not really like what we think. Like we're fans of TypeScript. We use it, but like there are things with it that can still be frustrating or still are weird or still are silly, right? And I think that this is a nice talk that sort of brings that to the foreground.
hmm I think my favorite quote of the show was React prop spreading madness, and then Trash had just drill it to the core of the earth. Just keep drilling. I
That's
thought
funny.
that was really funny to me.
I have in my React performance course, I talk about prop drilling. So that's really funny. I like that. I like that quote.
Next up, I have an interesting blog post by N Studio where they take MorphKit and migrate it to 100% TypeScript with NativeScript and AI. But what's really interesting is they show like a video here of them morphing like Swift code. So MorphKit is like a Swift UI framework, as far as I'm aware, and that's Swift code. So that's on iOS. But they went ahead and migrated that all into TypeScript, and they talked about all of their process of migrating that Swift code to TypeScript, and it's pretty slick. Like it's pretty cool. Yeah, they go all the way through it. They talk about some of the pros and cons, some of the like the weird things that they run into. I think if I were doing this, I would do the thing that Anders Heilsberg recommended, which is you write a tool to like to do this. Uh, but they do have a stack blitz where you can go and play with this stuff in TypeScript,
Oh, okay.
which is pretty neat.
Yeah, that's neat. So they took this thing, MorphKit, which was a UI kit written in Swift, right? Which is the Apple programming language.
Yep.
And then they converted it to or migrated it to NativeScript, which is what? I can write TypeScript and compile it to native code.
Okay. NativeScript provides platform APIs directly to the JavaScript runtime with strong types for a rich TypeScript development experience. So the idea here is that they were able to take this Swift package that was written in 100% Swift and migrate it to 100% TypeScript and then use NativeScript to build it for the platform. So they could use TypeScript instead of Swift is what I'm getting at, I think.
Okay.
Which is pretty slick.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I mean, that's kind of really nice for TypeScript developers. Like
Yeah.
you're basically saying you could write like a native library with TypeScript and not have to deal too much with like native Swift or Objective-C.
Now, I think there's probably an episode where we talk about NativeScript in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think a deep dive is warranted. So, NativeScript creator, you're being put on notice and you need to come on and talk to us and teach us about NativeScript and everything that we just said was wrong. Next up, we've got a library watch. This was something I saw on Reddit. If you are someone like Josh Goldberg who is writing compilers, linters, static analyzers, or any other tool that needs to report errors in source code, you may be jealous. Rust-style compiler diagnostics. Well, ariadne-ts is a package that basically is a port of that Rust crate to TypeScript. And so it says it's a TypeScript library for generating beautiful Rust-style compiler diagnostics, helps you create elegant, informative, and context-aware error reports. So this would be for like dev tool developers, not end users necessarily. But if you're writing dev tools that deal with TypeScript, this could be pretty cool. And I got to say, from that screenshot that they're showing, it definitely looks beautiful to me. I wish I had these types of errors regularly in TypeScript.
Definitely. I know NeoVim 11, 0.11 has similar-ish errors, looking errors, where they put like they draw little
Yeah.
ASCII lines to things. I don't think it's this in
You
particular.
mentioned before on an episode, one of your cool links was the TS pretty errors for like extension.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's maybe something you could get as a user, as an end user, that at least could make your error experience a little bit better if you're using like VS Code or something.
Yeah, for sure. This looks so cool.
Yeah. I hope people adopt it.
Awesome. Well, I think we're moving on to some cool links.
Yeah. What you got for us?
Well, I've got a couple of like perhaps the first one is perhaps completely useless for some people, but did you know you can have weather in the terminal?
Yeah, I do because I created a PowerShell module that's called PWSH weather or something like that.
Yeah,
Open
you
weather.
did.
Yeah, it uses the open weather API and it puts weather in your terminal if
That's
you're
right.
using PowerShell.
Well, you can, if you don't want to have an API key for the Open Weather API, you can call curl wttr.in and it'll just
Oh,
drop the current forecast for where you are in your terminal.
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty
I
slick.
wonder when that'll go down when they can't make money from it.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I'm just going to enjoy it while it's here.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Another one that I thought was pretty cool was this JSON repair package for fixing invalid JSON documents, which happens to me
Ooh.
more than you'd expect, especially when you're receiving information from like third parties, like you're doing like any kind of ETL type thing, or you're receiving documents from things or people you can't control.
Hmm.
This adds a lot of like awesome stuff, like common errors, like missing quotes around keys, missing escape characters, missing commas, missing brackets, truncated JSON, like say you were streaming something and suddenly you just lost connection. So you have a partial document. It'll help make it valid JSON. A lot of other conditions where this can be a problem, but this is super cool. And I have a couple use cases for this at work, and I'm going to be using it tomorrow.
Nice. That's really neat. I've definitely come across things like that. I've got a couple cool links. Obviously, I'm on vacation, so I'm not like checking everything super regularly, but I did come across something called JSii. It's from AWS, and it's what they use to create like libraries that are authored in TypeScript, but they can be used in Python, Java, C Sharp, or other languages from the .NET family, or TypeScript and JavaScript projects. So
What?
yeah, isn't that cool? Like we're talking about NativeScript, which can let you use like TypeScript code and native code, but you can write a TypeScript class library and then you can use it in C Sharp, Python, or Java, which is sort of mind blowing to me.
Okay, how does this work? This is
I do
bonkers to
not
me.
know. Yeah, I don't know how it works.
I'm looking at their website, and it looks like the way that they do it is they are proxying the like host, like so say you got a C sharp host and you're going to say, oh, I want to call into this class. Well, what they do is they proxy that call, forward it over to the JSii runtime, which is running Node, and then it interacts with it and then responds it back with it. So
Oh,
that's
I
how they're doing it,
see.
which is
So it's
very
not like
interesting.
a native thing. So it is still using a Node.js runtime behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
And I think that's
So
probably wise because then you have all of the semantics of the
yes.
original TypeScript, JavaScript thing that you wrote, and it'll behave like you expect versus
Yep.
like trying to cross compile it and have that behavior work in JVM or .NET Run.
Yes. Well, it's still pretty neat because I'm familiar with like JINT and I think JavaScript.net maybe might have been an older one, but those are the same type of deal where you can call like Node.js code from C Sharp, but you still have to write JavaScript to do it. Whereas with this, you can like write your code in TypeScript and then run it through this and just consume it as a library versus having to write any JavaScript inside of your C Sharp.
Yeah, I imagine this is a super cool thing for like a write once, run anywhere.
Yep.
It's easy enough to write the whatever client you're doing in TypeScript and then have it be consumable from wherever you're running.
Yeah, it's neat. And then since we've been driving quite a bit because we're doing a road trip, there is a specific site that I've been using regularly called cotrip.org. And probably if we have any listeners from Colorado, they already know about this site, but it is a site where you can get specific like road conditions in Colorado for like highways, which is super nice because when we're going from Denver to Cortez, I knew that we would be taking US 160. And so I could go check, hey, does 160 have any traffic issues that I need to know about that I might need to do a detour around or something? Because sometimes, Google doesn't always have exact information during your route that you might be taking. So super useful, but I guess it's kind of an example of like, you can create really specific niche sites that can still be super useful and really popular, because I think this is used. I don't know if I think it's created by the Colorado Department of Transportation, but don't quote me on that, but just pretty useful if you're driving around the mountains. All right. I think that's a show.
I think that's a show.
Cool.
Thanks for hanging out.
All right. Yep. Thanks for bearing with us during vacation.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to typescript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at kamronigus.com and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.